Hello viewers, this is Charles and this is the next in my series Learn Programming and Game Development with Lua. In the last two tutorials in this series we looked at while loops and repeat until loops. Now Lua has two other types of loop that we need to cover. They're both for loops. One of them is the numeric for loop and the other is the generic for loop. In this tutorial we're going to look at the numeric for loop. And then in the next tutorial, we're going to look at the generic for loop, which is closely associated with tables, which we'll cover as well. So I'm going to start with an example. So the first thing I'm going to do is to just print out that it's the first example. Now I'm going to create the simplest possible for loop, and then we'll talk through the components. So first I put the keyword for, and then I have to declare the control variable, which conventionally is I. Then I need the limit, and the limit for this I'm going to use 6. And then I have to give it something to do. So we type do, the do keyword, and then I'm going to print something out. Let's give it the loop number. I'll use the concatenation operator, and then the loop number will be I, the control variable. And then let's close the parentheses and then end. I'm also going to print another line while I remember, which will help when we come on to the second example. So now let's run it and see what happens. And I've just realized I've got too many commas because we're not using a step here. So let's take the last comma, the comma after 6 out, and try again. And you can see this time it worked, and we print gone loopy and then the loop number starting at 0. But the convention in Lua is to start at 1. So let's put that to the convention and run it again. And now we have conventional Lua for loop. In case you're wondering why I did that, I spend a lot of time programming in C, C++, Java and Rust. In those languages, for loops start with the control variable at 0. So if you look at this, you'll notice the first point about numeric for loops, which is they iterate a specific number of times. That number of times is defined by 3 expressions, but the last of those, the step, is optional, and to keep the first example simple I left it out, and the default for the step of course is 1. So here you can see on the first iteration we start with I equals 1 and we keep going until I is equal to the limit, and then we stop. Let's make a second example that specifies the step size. I'm also going to make another couple of changes to demonstrate a couple of other things along the way. So I'm going to leave a couple of blank lines to space this out, and then I'm just going to have another print statement, second example. That just makes the output a bit easier to read in the console. Now I'm going to declare 3 local variables, and these are going to be first, last and step. Now, step can be a negative integer as well as a positive one. And of course, if you use a negative one, that allows you to have loops that count down rather than up. Now, let's write the for loop itself. So we'll simply go for, first, last, step, do, and then we'll use the print statement that we used before. Concatenation operator I and then end, and then we're going to print a line again. Now let's run it and see what happens. Now I know this won't work, and I'm going to explain why it doesn't work when I've run it. And you can see it didn't work. In Lua for loops, the initial value, which in this case is first, needs to be a local variable declared in the for loop itself. So the way around this is if we go I equals first, then it should work. So let's try that. And you can see now it works. So let's just talk through this one to make sure we're clear what it's doing. So here we create a local variable I, and we assign it the value of first, which is 1. We could have just done that, which would work fine as well. Let's undo that. Then last is 6, so the effect will be the same as the first example. And then step at the moment is 1. What happens if we make step 2? Let's try it and find out. And you can see we print the odd numbers out instead of the whole sequence between 1 and 6. So if we set this to 3, we're only going to get 1 and 4 because the next number in that sequence would be 7, and 7 exceeds the last value. So the loop will exit before we get there. And you can see we get 1 and 4. Finally, suppose we want to count down. Let's try starting at 6, ending at 1 and going down 1 at a time, or even 2 at a time. Let's try 2 at a time. So what we expect now is to get 6, 4, 2. Let's see if we get what we expect. And you can see it works as expected. At this point, I think it's useful to say that when you're trying to learn coding, the most important thing you can do is to simply type in code. Don't copy paste code. Actually just type it in, because the process of typing it helps you to remember it. Let's now look at a third example where we break from the loop. For the third example, I'm going to take the second example and modify it. So we're going to start by changing this to third example. We're going to go back to starting at 1 and ending at 6. And we're going to stick to a step size of 1. I'm going to define a variable called broken. And I'm going to set it to -1. You'll see why it's -1 in a minute. Now in this third example, I want to demonstrate the use of the break keyword. And what I'm going to do is to create a condition where when we reach step 4, we break from the loop. So to do that, I'm going to go if, and then I, and then what we're going to do is to put the keyword len, and then we're going to break, and then we need to end the if statement. But there's one other thing I want to do here. What I want to do here is to set broken to the value of I when we break out of the loop. So that's easy enough. Broken equals I. Because broken was declared local outside of the for loop, it exists both inside the for loop and of course afterwards. So if after the for loop I print it out, we can find out where the loop broke. Then I need the concatenation operator and I need broken. Let's run the program and see if it behaves as expected. You can see from the value output by the print statement that the loop broke at 4. And that of course is what we expected. I hope you found this tutorial on numeric for loops in Lua useful. If you did, please click on the like and subscribe buttons. Have a great day.